Welcome this evening to our next edition of Burlington and Beyond, and I'd like to introduce our members here, Larry Way to my left and Pat Moreno to my right, and tonight we have a candidate for Attorney General, John Miller. Welcome, John. Glad to have you with us tonight.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And this evening we want to get his views on the role of the Attorney General and how it, how he feels he can enhance the lives of all the residents of Massachusetts by taking on the position. So, like a quick synopsis, if you may, John, about your background and how you perceive the role, and
sure.
take from there.
Sure, and I'll be quick so we can have a good exchange tonight. I appreciate that.
Excellent.
My mother dropped me off when I was 17 years old at MIT. My father and my mother, and she said, "Geez, I'm worried that you're never going to come back." And I stayed at MIT, graduated from MIT in civil engineering, went to law school after that. And what pops out when you're a civil engineer, and it took me a while to figure out. I had a little stint as a patent lawyer, but a construction lawyer is what popped out. And so I've been a construction lawyer for 36 years, public construction. I went back and got another degree at MIT and taught there for a while in civil engineering, but I've been a public construction lawyer for 36 years. The reason I've decided to enter the race is I just think that we need to get back to more professionalism in the office. The office is not it ought not to be a political platform. It is not a stepping stone to another office. To me, it's the most important job in this state, protecting the Constitution, protecting the laws that protect all of us and allow us to move about the state and to pursue our own dreams, our own, to work hard, to do what we like to do, to go see the Celtics, to go see the Patriots, or whatever it is we want to do. But that law is very important to protect, and I think it deserves protection.
I think it's terrific that you use the word Constitution and law. Those are two primary words that are just so important today. There has been so much discussion about them being pushed aside one way or another for political reasons. So it's good to hear you say that. What are the powers of the AG?
Well, it's a unique position in our state. In the federal level, the Attorney General is appointed by the President and serves at the pleasure of the President. Mm-hmm. In our state, in our Constitution, the Attorney General is a constitutional officer in his own or her own right. So the loyalty and the fiduciary obligations, the ethical obligations of the AG is to the AG's client. And the client is the people of the state. And that's been decided in several great Supreme Judicial Court decisions in the 70s. And Governor Dukakis, in one case, tried to tell the Attorney General that he must do something, and the Attorney General declined. And in the second case, the governor asked the Attorney General not to do something, and the Attorney General declined. And our court upheld that. So the job of the AG is to be independent and to be impartial. It's not a political launching pad.
My concern is if you suspect something, fraud, whatever it happens to be, in an institution, in individuals, one way or another, how do you go about confirming that or trying to confirm it? I mean, what tools do you have to?
Well, the Attorney General has subpoena powers in the criminal side and in the civil side. So in one respect, the Attorney General is very much like a district attorney on the criminal side. So if you think about how the district attorneys operate in each county, they are the front line of criminal prosecution and law enforcement on the criminal side. Mm-hmm. There's a criminal bureau inside the Attorney General's office that handles inter-county crime and interstate crime.
Okay.
And all those powers that a district attorney would have to interview witnesses, to subpoena documents, to make arrests. Mm-hmm. There's a state police unit attached to the Attorney General's office. There's a civil investigative side that's attached to the Attorney General's office. Okay. So the Attorney General has subpoena power and it has arrest. The state police have arrest power.
Yeah.
So the Attorney General's office is a very unique. It's really, as I said, a very unique position in the state. It's, to me, as a lawyer, it's the most important position.
I'm just wondering how you get information with regard to an issue. you depend on the public reporting something, or do you, I mean, are you constantly looking over records and whatnot?
Well, I think information can come into a prosecutor in a variety of ways, just like in the DA's office, there can be a complaint.
Okay.
But there's also an obligation to look into and follow up on events that seem wrong. So, for example, the Department of Revenue generally audits our taxes, and they will make referrals to the Attorney General in the event that the Department of Revenue finds something that appears to be criminal.
Okay.
Okay, so that could happen, or it could come from another agency. You know, you could imagine, you know, any agency that's awarding contracts if they suspect that something is illegal going on. But there's also an opportunity by the AG to start his own investigation.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
A question for me, which sticks in the back of my mind, is, you know, we've been a one-party state for a very long time. Obviously, the recent patronage issue that has, you know, gone to trial and has gotten some convictions. We've had our share of issues with our leaders in our House of Representatives in the state, and you know, sometimes you wonder, because it's a one-party state, how much of it has been swept under the rug, and how do you see the role of the Attorney General, you know, making our other elected officials adhere to, you know, the rules of the road, if you will, in terms of, you know, what our Constitution dictates, and keeping an eye on, you know, how they perform, because it's been problematic now for some time.
Well, I agree with you, and I think we haven't seen, in my view, an independent Attorney General in a long time, one who's really independent of a party, because for the last 24 years, the Attorney General has tried to move on to become the governor.
That's true. Yeah.
And so I think, you know, I've learned from practicing. You practice law for 36 years, and what you come to realize is, you know, if you don't have the interests of your client in your head, and you start thinking about yourself, you get confused about who the client is and where your loyalty lies. You know, in the private world, you get fired, and you know, you don't have a client.
Yeah.
And that's a reputational thing, but it's also an ethical thing for me. So I think, you know, the AG has the opportunity to really put some fresh air into the government, into how people feel about the government, because to me, all of us who are working hard, trying to mind our own business, make our way through the society in our careers, or, you know, help our kids grow up, you know, the things that I've done as a parent, my wife has done as a parent, you like to feel that there's balance and there's fairness in how the laws are applied. So I think the AG's, that's a very important role. I think one of the things that distinguishes me from my opponents is, you know, I don't have a lot of the shall we say, the encumbrances they might have. You know, I've been working for 36 years. I'm a fan of hard work, and I'm fairly confident I can call them straight. I'll call the issues as I see them. You know, Frank Bellotti, who I admire a lot, used to say, you know, follow the facts, apply the law, the politics will take care of itself. And I think we need that. That's very, very important for all of us.
And as a follow-on, or in the back of my mind, I think of the big dig that lasted, what, 15, 16, 17 years, if it ever stops for that matter, and all the issues surrounding that particular program, and quite honestly, it's almost, you know, bankrupt the construction fund in this state going forward for God knows how long. If you had been Attorney General at that time, what kind of impact might you have had, or should have had, or whoever was there at the time should have had overseeing that project? I mean, what kind of role would the Attorney General play in a scenario like that?
Well, I think this answer will surprise you a little bit, but you know, that's my wheelhouse: civil engineering, design, and public construction.
Right.
You know, to me, there's a very famous curve written by a professor out at Stanford called the Paulson influence curve, and but basically what he posits is the best time to make an impact on a project like that is at the very beginning, when you're putting it together, because after it's all locked in stone and contracted out, you're making tiny course corrections in an aircraft carrier. And I think the problem there was right at the beginning, the way that was structured, they divided the project into 26 pieces. Mm-hmm. So a section next to a section next to a section. different designers for each section, different contractors for each section. So they created, I mean, and the logic, I understand the political logic of that.
Was that so that some of it could be handled by the federal government versus the state?
So that it would be handled by smaller contractors who could be local, instead of the very largest contractors from around the world, or from the West Coast. So the contracting structure was unusual, I would say, and I think if I were the AG at the time, I would not have allowed such a small piecemeal contracting, which the project paid for a long time. The second comment I would make is they opened construction on the southern end of the project before they had a permit to cross the Charles River. And that was because of the, Tip O'Neill was the speaker. Oh, I lived through this.
So did I, yeah, I remember it.
Tip O'Neill was the speaker. There was 90-10 federal highway money,
the federal government was supposed to cover most of it at the time.
They did cover a lot of it, and they would have covered 90% if the cost had not increased. But let me just say that situations, the political imperatives to move quickly, to divide the projects into pieces, I think those were decisions that were never capable of being recovered from, cost-wise.
Yeah. And we're paying for it to this day.
Yeah, but I was teaching in the middle of that. We had students crawling over that project as it was being built.
I can imagine.
Yeah, soil freezing, all kinds of.
Well, bad cement, or all kinds of issues that cropped up downstream.
Yes.
So as Attorney General, would you have, let's say, an overall objective, like a mission? Or what in the state do you feel needs the most amount of oversight, or the value that you spoke about an independent Attorney General, which I agree would be the most healthiest things for the state to have?
Well, I think that, in part the reason why people use the Mass Pike as an example and try to use this as a metaphor. The reason, you might drive 67 on the Mass Pike and feel pretty comfortable that things are okay. You might go to 69. You might go to 71. Well, when you get to 75, you're pushing the envelope, and a trooper's going to stop you. You're going to get a ticket. And I think the analogy applies in the area of public corruption, for example. 40 years ago, if you rigged the award of a contract, it was not only bid rigging and bribery if you were involved with a public official, it was also larceny. Because you're arranging for one entity to have a contract that might not have been entitled to it. I think the analogy applies to jobs. If you're running a theoretically fair employment process where hardworking individuals are competing for advancement, but in fact it's not fair and it's rigged. To me, I think you have to lay some markers down. And 8 years ago, this Attorney General stopped issuing an organized set of what Frank Bellotti would call Attorney General advisory opinions. And I just think that the AG in some areas needs to make it clear that this kind of conduct is not going to be tolerated. And I think people will understand. It's kind of like the unwritten speed limit rule on the Mass Pike. I just think that's one of the things that I'm going to focus on. And I hope that it's not fun to go prosecute people who are doing things like that. I mean, most people working for the state are trying to do the right thing and trying to work hard. But I think so. That's an example.
So you're talking about some higher standards all the way around, from purchasing to employment, that we're almost not quite used to. I can see we could have some difficulty implementing those ideals.
I've been involved in complex projects like that. I was involved in an ABA project where we rewrote the procurement laws, suggested procurement laws for all the states, and there's a model that we wrote. It's been adopted in many states, and it's Chapter 30B in our state. So our legislature applied it to the cities and towns, but did not apply it to the state. I mean, that's something that I think would be a useful thing to extend. So I might be an advocate for something like that. So higher standards, but I think that's what everyone wants. Everyone who's trying to do the right thing.
Exactly.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, switching gears a little bit, and I'm not sure how much this falls under your preview and how much it falls under the federal government, but now that we have this crossing down on our southern border, and kids being flown all over the country, and I guess Lynn has all of a sudden collected quite a few of them. what do you perceive the role of the Attorney General dealing with undocumented or illegal residents in the state, and where does the state go going forward? Because if those kids stay here, it's going to be quite a bit of a financial burden for the towns that are responsible for it.
Well, we have actually, we've taken quite a tough position on this publicly in our campaign, and I think I'm the only Attorney General candidate that's talking about this. And it's not, sweep away the politics, forget the politics for a minute. What I'm not concerned about the capacity of this country to take care of, a certain number of thousands of children. That's not my concern. But what I am concerned about is that the health laws of the state of Massachusetts are enforced, that the public safety laws are enforced. Some of these kids are not kids, and some of these kids are maybe gang members. And now I've met with some of the sheriffs and some of the DAs. There's a gang identification unit at Plymouth County Jail. And I just think that there ought to be some steps taken to make sure that the state's laws about public health and public safety are enforced, and I think that can be done smoothly, and it can be done with a written contract, and it can be enforced. But the other thing I'm most worried about is what happens to a city school system. We have that's
a big one.
Proposition 2.5 that binds. There's an upper limit on the ability of cities and towns to pay for schools.
As there should be.
I don't question that.
You can't pour these kids into towns and expect them to
But if
put on the
you're,
burden.
but
That's
what
ludicrous.
about kids that are, working their way through? I went to big city high school myself, and it was a great experience.
But your parents are paying property taxes,
Right.
which is what we all do.
But I just
fund
worry.
it.
I think in the example, I know that the mayor of Lynn has been quite vocal about this. You put a couple hundred kids in an inner city school.
At 14 grand a kid.
You can tip over a school system.
Yes, you
and,
can.
And this worries me. And I think, before the governor or before anyone allows this to happen, the way I think about it is, if this goes south, and I don't mean, if this goes badly, the only person that can represent the state in court is the Attorney General. So it seems to me that it may be a good idea for administrative agencies to be involved, but the Attorney General should be in the middle of this. And I've asked for my opponents to speak about this, and I've asked for the Attorney General weigh in on this. This
steering
is
clear
something
of
that
it.
should be
It's a legal issue. They're
handled up front,
Yeah.
because if it goes badly, they're going to be turning around and looking at the next Attorney General to fix it.
How
And
about
then,
the
and then
federal-
it's just the kids that are here, and then the brothers and sisters show up, and downstream the parents will show up. mean-
To me, it's not about, I just think about it from the lawyer point of view, because that's the job of the AG. And my grandfather came from Scotland when he was 14, and his 18-year-old brother met him in New York at Ellis Island. So
But that's a legal process.
he
back
went through a
then.
legal process.
This isn't.
I understand. But the AG is not going to be able to prevent,
Well, that's why
the
Matt
Mass
is.
Attorney General is not going to be able to prevent activities at the border that's in violation.
That's what I
of law.
meant. It's more of a federal role
It
than
is a
it is
federal role.
a
Part of that
state role.
contract, I would imagine that the AG has to, or would insist upon making sure that the government is going to pick up the tab for all of this too. I
well,
would think that's an important part.
I actually, if you go to MassachusettsSafe.com, there's a pro forma draft of a contract that I wrote
Oh.
and put up on the web, and I did that on behalf of the President Attorney General and on behalf of the governor, so they could walk into that negotiation with the feds armed with a contract.
Because are the towns going to get sued because they're not teaching these kids in their native language? They're not providing the right kind of housing and other support infrastructure that they require. I mean, there's all kinds of financial responsibility being dropped in the town that it
I
certainly
think
is not going to be able
there's
to carry.
hundreds of
It's
unintended
brutal.
consequences from this.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
I mean, it's just
And you can't even,
Uncontrolled.
I don't think any of us could write them down if we sat around a table and tried to write them all down. We could not imagine the unintended consequences.
And I know there's only so much of a role the state attorney general can really get involved with here, but I was just curious what if any steps.
One would hope that it would be an opportunity if the federal government chose to have this as an opportunity to identify who's coming, at least, to get good identification on them, and to know where they are. I would hope that...
My understanding is they have nothing other than their word. The
I
word
don't
of most
know.
of them.
I went to the hearing in Bourne about the use of Otis Air Force Base, the old
Oh.
Otis, and I heard a representative from the Department of Homeland Security of the state, and basically what he was saying, a nice man, he was saying that his information, the information he had was coming from the federal government, but there was no independent information really that the state has. So that part of it's a little troubling as well.
So these kids are without passports, no documentation, no idea what their background is. So half of them could be
Don't even know
criminals
where
for
they
all we
came
know.
from.
I don't know
What-
that that's
what
true or
states they're
not. I
from?
don't
You
know.
know, it's just-
that's a problem.
It's hard to
But they've
believe.
been- I'd like to ask you I guess it might be a political question, I'm not sure. And I'd like to quote, "In so many different situations, from gun rights to abortion to privacy rights to free speech, why is it that the government is able to substitute its position
For the
I
Constitution.
remember
for
that.
someone's own individual position?" How much, as a Republican, how much, how can I word this? How much should the government, this is very difficult to answer, I would imagine, how much power should the government have over the individual, or the individual should be prime? And that's the AG's job, is to guarantee that the individual, according to the Constitution and the law, and is that why you are a Republican?
In most respects, that's why. You know, my father was the first person in our family. You know, if all my great uncles and aunts were alive, there would be 72 of them. My father was the first in our family to go to college on the GI Bill after he served in World War II. He used to say you can never get enough education, which he changed his mind in my case. But, but you know, we were taught that, you know, go find out what you want to do and chase it, and figure out what you're good at and can do, and make reasonable choices and pursue that. And I value that highly. I think that's what that's the most unique thing about our country, is that
Exactly.
people can move around. So that language sounds familiar, and I think it's from Scott Lehigh's column in the Globe. But I think the answer to that is that the Constitution is already the answer. So, and I'm not talking about the U.S. Constitution only. I'm talking about the Massachusetts Constitution,
Right.
which John Adams wrote 7 years before the
The U.S.
federal
Constitution, yeah.
So, you know, the reason, and what's interesting about, you know, in some of the social issues that people have, you know, have big differences of opinion on. Those issues, the people who wrote our Constitution understood that people would have
I agree.
big issues,
I agree.
different views on.
Yeah.
And that is no different today than it was in 1780.
Right.
And so I think the answers may move a little bit as people's people's views change a little bit, but tolerance is a two-way street.
Yeah. Times change. Situations change, but the Constitution is it is the thing that we should live under as best we can.
You know,
And you?
Yeah, I agree. I was taught, you know, in law school that you know, my right to swing my arms stops at your nose.
Right.
I mean, that's the way that, you know. So I think obviously the purpose of government is to you know, mediate, you know, resolve the natural things that happen when people bump into each other, either
Yeah.
physically or, you know,
Yeah,
property-wise or however.
There's
But-
mechanisms in the Constitution if you want to make a change, and there's mechanisms in the courts for
Right.
something not quite as, you know, necessarily
But
as deep a change.
Yeah, but those, you know, the system of government devised was pretty durable.
Yeah, it's
I
well thought
respect
out.
it.
I remember, I think it was one of the candidates when we met earlier talked about having a little bit of a wind at our backs. I'm referring to the fact that Massachusetts has been a one-party state for so long. It's disturbing. It has always disturbed me And it's one of the reasons why I'm personally am here tonight, and I would like to think that it's probably the same reason that you're here tonight. And do you feel comfortable with running and how can I word it? You know, with the anticipation of what's to come.
Well, I
Has-
think I have no illusions that, you know, as Charlie, I think it was Charlie that says things like
I
that.
think
The
so
wind is
too,
at our
yeah.
back, but Charlie Baker. But I have no illusions that this is going to be a tough election. But I think that the major difference is that we're running a completely different campaign than whoever emerges from the Democratic primary. You know, I don't think that either of them is going to be in a position to deal with events like that probation scandal. You know,
Right.
there's two. They're. It's all part of the same.
Exactly.
Same. Now, they, you know, in the primary on the other side, they're competing for endorsements. They're competing for groups. They're competing, you know, on issues. You know, to kind of divide and get people for one or against another, and that's exactly the reason why special interests have power.
Right.
So you know, to me, the other side of this campaign is a laboratory, if people will look at it that way, for
Yeah.
what's wrong with the Attorney General's office. So
It's
I think we have a
positioning.
great shot at bringing a fresh air to that office.
Well, and it has been a very political office for the last 8 years, very political, which would be nice to see some of that that curtain pulled back and, you know, have something that's a little bit more just focused on the job itself.
And the other reason why the wind is at our back in your situation, because we've had so many scandals. Each month it seems like we'll learn about something new. One of the ones, one such scandal was like the healthcare website. Is anything being done about that, or is it legally?
Well, I think I don't know because again it's shrouded in a bit of fog and mystery. But again, that's right in my wheelhouse. You know, back in the day I represented Wang Laboratories on all their government contracts. We were with a team of lawyers, and Wang had their own in-house lawyers. You know, we worked together in government contracting for Wang. I'm used to computer contracts, application software development contracts. I've read the contract between the state and the website developer. Some of the most standard clauses that are in every government contract I've ever seen in my life are not there.
Not in there.
No boilerplate.
And you know, so to me, looking at that and seeing that process started in the right agency of government within administration and finance. And for some reason, unexplained, it was finished out at the University of Massachusetts Medical School, a great medical school, but the contracting officers were two policy guys. Now, why that contract wasn't finished and run out of the state entity that was charged to do it with the right expertise is unexplained. I have my ideas, and I think if I were the AG, I would have stopped it. And the contracting process was very strange, very unusual, outside of the ordinary. And when I was a young guy, when Frank Bellotti was the AG, he would have stopped it. Part of being a good lawyer is to be proactive. A big contract like that, you look at it before it goes out. And because you're the person that's going to have to, you're in the soup when that contract goes wrong. And when you're in the soup, really, the people of the state are in the soup.
So when the contract reaches a certain threshold, you would want to review that to make sure it sounds not very risky.
Yeah, well,
And what could go wrong?
Yeah, that contracts like that have been entered into by states for the last 20 years. There's a whole expertise in law on that. People know how to do that. There are in-house counsel that know how to do that. It's very unusual what that process was, and it was outside of the ordinary. And when things don't look ordinary,
They're usually not.
they're usually not ordinary.
Yeah.
And so it seems to me that that was I'd said this to Scott Lehigh, and he 40 hours of lawyering would have prevented the loss of $200 million. Now that's 10 elementary schools.
Mm-hmm.
How many bridges repainted and sanded and fixed? How many, go down the list of needs for cities and towns. How much state aid? That's $200 million in, aid to communities.
And when you think state aid's been falling for the last 10 years, the towns are really
So it's
struggling for that.
Yeah, being a lawyer isn't, lawyers are not the most loved profession in the world,
Well, that's true.
But when you go to someone and you want your mortgage done properly and you want your deed to be done right, you need a nudge. Someone is going to pay attention to the details. And I think I don't think either of my opponents understand the importance of paying attention to the details. Makes a big difference.
I have to wonder how much of it is tied to politics.
I don't know. I'm not.
No, you
I'm
can't.
not really
yeah.
a political animal. I survived the politics of my house.
As Larry indicated, there's so many scandals that have come forward. Child welfare, for example, is not too long ago was a problem.
Oh, the HHS issues?
Yeah. But the biggest one, of course, was probation, and when you have a one-party system, I've gone through this so many times. When you have one party dominant for such a long period of time, how wrong is that? You've got to have two parties so that one is looking at what the other party is doing.
Right.
It just makes sense, and I don't understand how people can continue to vote for the same individuals.
Well, I think state reps and state senators are very local, and they know people, they know their
Yeah.
voters, and I
Yeah.
think, that's. I hear what you're saying, and I agree with it, but that is a different topic than, if you're inside the agency, taking care. You are operating in the trust.
You're following
the law, and you're
yeah.
doing the right. You have
Right.
operational control of your cash.
Yeah.
And I just wonder. You hear some of the crazy anecdotes that come out about EBTs and things like that. It's hard to. You start to wonder whether they have operational control over disbursements.
It's
Yeah.
pretty clear they don't,
And-
from what I
and-
could see.
And if you were a publicly held corporation,
Oh, you'd fire
and you
everybody.
didn't have
Oh.
operational control of your cash, you'd be
People be
in a
rolling.
lot of trouble.
Oh, absolutely.
So I think it gets back to the point you made earlier, Larry. It's kind of, this is a public trust. Let's raise the bar a little bit.
Kind of spinning off into a different direction, because I'm not quite sure how much input the Attorney General has, but federal government has its set of regulations, which are beyond overbearing. And Massachusetts is not terribly far behind when it comes to regulation vis-a-vis the other 50 states, which is why half the people are moving down south, because there's a little bit less people in your backyard looking at writing down every piece of information that they can in terms of what you do, whether you start a business or how you run your town, or any other kind of environment seems to be regulated under the ground. Obviously, you don't write the laws, but the Attorney General has some input, I assume, in terms of how the laws
Well,
should
let
be
me
read
let me
and what
give you
the
an
inputs
example
are.
of how of a law that I think should be enforced and enforced more effectively, and it's the wage and labor laws. I come from the construction industry, and you have people competing on the basis of price, who act very differently in how they perform work. So if you're not paying the wage mandated by state law, and you're competing against people who must, because of lack of enforcement, you're in kind of this you're in this playing field that is always tilted against you.
Uncharted territory most of the time.
Right, and so I think that is something that should be enforced, but not anecdotally. I mean, there are ways to do this systematically. From my experience with federal contracting, there's a whole range of systems that could be put in place so people self-certify, and people have programs which explain, here's how I'm showing that I'm doing what's right under the wage and labor laws of the state. People that are working 70, 80 hours with no overtime. And how do if you're doing the right thing, how do you compete with that? And
Or
so
maybe it may not necessarily be a resident of the country, for that matter.
right.
Which is a big part of the problem.
Right. So I think I think there's some pieces of the law that ought to be more rigorously enforced. But you can't do this. You need to stand up some systems. I think a lot of these agencies they're running XP, which is not even supported anymore. And so you wonder. I just think that there's a great opportunity to kind of re-energize things. Many of the laws that are not enforced evenly should be, and it's the lack of enforcement that leads to further lawlessness. And I think you pick your spots.
Here's another question, not quite in the same vein, but we've been passing laws in this state for what, 400 years, more or less. There are probably the last 50 or 60 years, some are relevant. There are laws in the books that go back to the 1700s that are still in the books. Is there ever a mechanism to kind of erase some of those that really don't have any bearing on society anymore? Is that a responsibility that's kind of in your preview, or does that have to go back to the
Well, I
legislature?
think it used to be until not too long ago. Every 20 or 30 years, there'd be a complete recodification of the laws. So, like the Internal Revenue Code of 1954 lasted for many years. It wasn't recodified until 1986. So people, you had.
Have we ever in this state? Have we ever recodified our laws?
Yes.
Oh, we
Yeah,
have.
I don't know the details, but yes, we have completely rewritten the laws several times. But this answer will surprise you again, but there's something called the statute of frauds, which goes back to the 1300s in England. And if you don't have if you have a contract, if it's not in writing, it may not be enforceable. You need so some things on those books are absolutely essential and must never go away.
Well, that part may
And-
be
and-
true, but there's
yeah.
a lot of things on those
Right.
books that should have been gotten rid of a long
I
time
agree.
ago. And sometimes somebody pulls a law out from 300 years ago and says, okay, I can attack this guy on this particular issue, even though it has no bearing on the subject matter at hand.
And that
And
would
those
be
should be-
real work for the legislature.
Well, it'd be something for them to do. They do so little
No,
now.
but I
Real-
think I mean
Real
no, but
work.
I mean it in a good way.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, you read the statutes about wiretapping, and they all the assumption is that it's all about putting a device on a phone wire in Ma Bell's home building
Yeah,
and
we kinda
putting
moved-
another wire.
Yeah, we kind of moved beyond that a
Yeah,
little bit.
we're quite a bit beyond it. And I've talked to the DAs, and there are some changes in the criminal laws vis-a-vis warrants and searches. How do you get access to smartphone data? You've arrested someone who's in a drug gang.
Well, do what the
And-
federal government does and just copy everything.
Well, no, but that the Supreme Court has very recently
I
said
know
that
they
you
have.
need a warrant,
Yeah.
because that's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. So how do there are areas where those things need to happen. And one of the things that I've committed to, and when I'm talking to the district attorneys and the sheriffs, is that there's a lot of data being collected in each of these places, but it's not organized, collected, and then passed back to the legislature. We spend $5 billion a year on public health and safety. How are we doing? What's different about this year from last year and from the year before that? And
Where does the money go? Does anybody even know?
well, that's my point. So, how effective is the money that is being spent? And the money that's being spent to do crime statistics, and, is it wisely spent? Do we have data about, Middlesex County that is not ever tied into data from Worcester County? And how are we doing
yeah.
relative to, among the counties? Are we allocating money in the proper places? And my sense is, and this comes from my engineering training, usually you try to make decisions based on facts, and facts change over time. And so you'd like to have the information flow. I mean, this
absolutely.
organization could be, the organization called the state should be collecting information, feeding it back for law enforcement, for the legislature, for the governor.
And the data's out there. It's just a matter of
Yes.
crunching numbers. They could always call up Google. I'm sure they have all the data in their banks.
Well, maybe. But part of what I think I'm trying to do is to get, let's be a little more specific about what we're doing and why. And I think that one of the things we're going to stand up, and we're still working on it with sheriffs and the district attorneys, is a complete relook at how crime is handled in the state, and where are we spending money, and how effective is it, and these are important questions.
Oh,
Spending
absolutely.
$5 billion a year.
Yeah.
If I could add too, I think the data's there, but the problem is running into people's agendas. They have an agenda, and that's what they're interested in carrying out. So once again, I really appreciate the fresh look, and we want to support you any way we can. But if we could just go back to the
Sure.
illegals that are coming to the state, who would that contract be with, and would it be enforceable if we agree to take in 2,000, 3,000 the illegals in the state? Well, then the administration is going to push us to 4,000 to 5,000. And so what mechanisms are there, and who would this contract be with? And is this a real viable solution?
Well, right now, HHS is contracting with a variety of entities around the country to handle the emergency. I'm talking about another contract or another grant. And,
And this would be with the contract
it would
with
probably be HHS,
HHS,
or
okay.
DHS. And I'm not saying it to figure out how to encourage this to happen in greater numbers. But what I'm concerned about is citizens in this state that are hurt by it, by the unintended consequences. So I think you could write a contract that's enforceable. I think you might be able to include offsets. If there are monies owed by the state to the federal government, and the federal government is not making its payments under this arrangement with respect to these kids, the state's entitled to offset those payments. So, a creative lawyer, that's what you do. You try to figure out how are we going to get this money, how are we going to make sure this is even Steven. One of the most important part of that agreement would be who's here, where are they?
Well, if you're that creative,
And that's an essential piece.
I was going to say, if you're that creative, could you go back to Honduras, Guatemala, and Mexico and get the money out of them?
I think the United States government could.
Yeah. They should. Just curious.
I'm not,
Not
that's
sure
way
that's
above
pub-
my pay grade.
Yeah,
I'm
sure
just
it
running
is.
for the little tiny state attorney general office.
To name a few.
Speaking of, or you have spoken about resources here in Massachusetts with all the schools, the medical institutions and whatnot. Do you think that we're doing as much as we can to keep those people here? This is probably not directly in line with the AG's office, but do you think that we're doing as much as we can to keep keep those good minds here?
No.
Okay.
And it is right in the middle of the AG's function, because the AG is, as most people don't know this, the AG is the regulator for nonprofits.
Oh.
Every university, every nonprofit in the state is regulated by the Attorney General.
Which means that you would have input.
So, I mean, sometimes the Attorney General gets in an argument with the university about, the level of pay.
Okay.
That has happened. A variety of issues come up with, with respect to smaller nonprofits, where you have embezzlement in smaller nonprofits. The AG investigates
Yeah.
and polices that.
Mhm.
So I think you look around Massachusetts, the medical research that goes on here, the scientific research, the spin-offs, the old Route 128 is, much of that is still here.
Yeah.
And I think the state needs to be very careful about the legal skeleton
Mhm.
upon which all of those activities hang,
Mhm.
because there's so much spin-off from that to
Yeah.
all of us. I mean, we benefit from, every single one of us in the world benefits from this research. And I would be very concerned that the AG not make this an inhospitable place for research hospitals, for medical training, for medical research, for
Oh, absolutely.
engineering research.
Yeah.
I mean, you have Drapers here, Miters here, you know, you
Gemzyme,
get
all the
Genzyme,
bioscience companies.
But that's just one example. I mean, you know, one of my favorite innovations I've ever seen is what one of my electrician buddies calls the smash connector. And it's this little piece of plastic. It's about the size of a cork. And you put the wires into this thing, it organizes all the wires, and then you smash it with a mallet, and all your wires are in the right place organized. Now that's probably about probably about a 5-cent piece to manufacture, but some smart electrician out in the field said, hey, you know what, I'm sick of tangling with wires. So innovation comes in a variety of different ways, and we should be open to it and embracing it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that I think it would be nice to encourage a lot more of these individuals to stay here that have been trained here. Why not? You know, how do we compare with other states?
In what respect?
AGs.
Oh well, I think let's see.
That's a wide open. I mean. Does it vary, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at, from state to state to any great extent? Or?
In terms of responsibilities, what they oversee, that kind of...
yeah.
Well, I think our state is a bit unique. I mentioned this at the beginning about being a constitutional officer and independent. So I think that's a very good feature because the AG really is an independent check on the legislature and on the governor with respect to the Constitution, fundamental rights of people, and what I was talking about earlier, the common law. People, I tease people, I've been in that 4th level of government for 36 years, which is, where, you go out and work and police yourself, so, but we rely on that law. So I think that's a very kind of unique structure and I'm quite proud of that. And the modern AG's office was invented here in that respect and copied around other states.
Oh, I didn't know that.
So that independence, and I think it's very, very good.
Here's an area that we really haven't touched, which a lot of people just associate with the Attorney General's office as the core responsibility, but crime and its many varied, forms, between gangs, between corruption. all the issues that fall underneath the jurisdiction of the Attorney General, and where do you see yourself taking how that is handled vis-a-vis how it's been done in the past? I mean, there's a lot of politicization of some of the issues that have been played up versus some of the more serious issues that have occurred in the state.
Well, I think drug overdose is drug overuse and
epidemic.
misuse is epidemic. I think there's a real problem with subscriptions. People's ability to get oversubscribed for addictive drugs, and I think gang violence is a problem, and it's of epidemic proportions. So I've met with DAs of both parties. I've met with every DA in the state that will answer a call. I've met with many sheriffs around the state, and I ask all the same questions, which is, what should the AG be doing to help? And I think, the criminal bureau inside the AG's office, if to think about it properly, it's really like another county. So you have the various DAs in the counties, and then there's this other county called the criminal bureau inside the AG's office. They handle multi-county crime, interstate crime, and in egregious cases, the AG can take any case. So if you had a case of corruption in one of the district attorney's offices, the AG could take it. I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but that protection is there. So really, the job of the AG is kind of like when I rode crew in college, and it's kind of like being in a crew boat. There's you're in the boat together with the district attorneys and the sheriffs, and with the police chiefs and law enforcement. Nobody can get out. You can't get out.
And you can only go forward.
You can't get out. And there's no heroes, there's no goats, and you have to figure out how to help each other. And I think the AG is in the best position to lead on behalf of everyone else in that boat. Not to showboat and not to grandstand, but to go get what's necessary, if more power is necessary or more money is necessary.
I was going to say, so you can dictate resources to specific issues when you see something that requires it.
Within the AG's office, but the district attorneys have separate funding
Okay.
and separate appropriations. The district attorneys are, in the criminal world, they act quite, they're
Fairly independent, then.
fairly independent, as they should.
They don't
as
report
they
up to
should.
you?
No, they do not report, but we're all in the same,
Dotted
boat.
line, even? Not
No.
even that? Okay.
No. As it should be.
Okay, I was just,
You
not
cross,
completely
you
sure
cross
of
the line with
structure.
one of the district attorneys in the county, and they have full prosecutory discretion, as it should be, in my opinion.
Is
Sure,
that an elected,
definitely.
or is that an appointed position?
Elected.
Just trying to remember.
Would you care to comment on the Lisa Pelletier case?
Well, I think it's a sad it's a story that you couldn't anticipate or write. And I guess my only comment would be, to me, it's another example of an agency that should have picked up the phone and gotten some advice from the Attorney General. That's a very aggressive step that was taken, in my opinion, and it put the state in a very difficult spot, parents in a difficult spot, agency in a difficult spot. There's no winners in that case.
Well,
Just
true.
that-
Could the Attorney General have done something different to make the
Well,
make the
I
case?
guess I would. It seems to me that I would have had people go to a little bit greater lengths to try to avoid that long exercise in court. This is a Connecticut girl.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but you had
trapped between two diagnoses and two
different
teachers.
hospitals had
Right.
two different diagnoses, and
Yeah. So
that's crazy.
I don't think there's not a lot of not a lot of good to say about it. Other than I think that's the kind of case where you'd hope the AG would be very active in stopping something.
I would say anytime they can just take the children, I would say that the AG's office should probably look into that, oversee it.
Well,
Should
I
this be
believe
happening?
the agency appeared in court, and I think the AG was there. So, as I said right at the outset,
And it
the
still
only
went through.
the only person that can appear for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in a court in this state is the Attorney General or one of the Assistant Attorney Generals.
Okay.
So to me, I think some steps should have been taken to try to short circuit that process and not put the state in the middle of what is an insolvable conflict.
I have a personal question. What do you do with your free time?
Well,
What do you like to do to relax, I guess is what I...
Well, a number of things. When I was a younger man, I used to row a lot, and we're all the Millers are a little basketball crazy.
Have you read it?
Of course, yeah.
Great.
My oldest son played basketball in high school, and here many times against Burlington. My middle son played basketball at Winchester. My daughter was 2, played basketball. So a lot of basketball games. My son went on to play in college. He was a teammate of Jeremy Lin's at Harvard, so they were co-captains together at
Oh, wow.
Harvard. And so a lot of basketball games. I've been overseas to Germany to see my son play basketball there.
Oh,
and
wonderful.
a lot of rowing races. My wife and I are.
Chug it on the Charles every
Well, we've put
September.
a lot of energy
October.
into our family. And, the best thing, I think my wife and I would agree, the best thing we ever did was, the 3 kids we've had, and to see them grow up and become great people, and that's the most important thing we've ever done.
Are they all close by?
That's nice.
My son's in Boston, and my second son, my middle son, is in Waltham. He works in Waltham, lives in Needham, and my daughter's in law school out in Michigan. So she's the youngest.
She's the only one that's distant. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, but so I do that, and we go to a lot of basketball games. So I can't tell you how many basketball games I've been to. A lot,
Next month, not next month, October, they have the regatta here.
Yep, the head of
Yeah.
Charles.
Head of the Charles, yeah.
We're skiers, downhill skiers, everyone's, and likes to do that. We do snowshoeing. We get out in the woods and try to get away from
Civilization.
try to get away from the phone mostly.
Yeah. What do you mean?
Get away from the computer and the
What if
phone.
it's on your hip, isn't
Yeah.
it? How do you ever get away from it? Especially
Throw it in the water.
Especially with kids.
And if things get too quiet, you run for office.
Well, I thought long and hard about this. Not too long, but the opportunity came up in March, and I approached Baker about the idea, and it isn't. I just think there's not one person that can do this job. There's not one person, but I think I can. I think I will go down there, and I will pay attention. I will enforce the laws impartially and fairly, and I will not run a personal agenda out of the AG's office. And I think that's what's required.
And I think I read on your website that it was just time to get involved. It was time to step in. And again, with all that we saw going on under the current administration, I'm so glad that you did step up
Well, it's
to
nice
be the
of you to
independent
say that.
voice and to represent us. So tell us about your schedule coming up. If you
Well-
have any events and before the primary?
Well, I have a number of events. I'm doing a lot of cable shows. As many events like this is very important to me because none of the attorney general candidates have the same name recognition as in the governor's race. But so for me to get on to do cable TV and just for people to understand who I am and that there's an alternative this year, it's very important to me. I do probably spend 5 or 6 hours per day raising money on the phone. And I probably
Wow.
spend 3 or 4 hours a day going to events to meet people and doing some door knocking. My favorite thing to do is just walk down the business section of a small town. I've just walked through Braintree a couple weeks ago. Just walk into every business in the town, say, "Hi, how you doing? I'm running for Attorney General. How's business?" And try to find out what's on their mind about how the state is working with them and how it works and how their business is going.
That's got to be
And
fun.
it is very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I want to make-
Tiring, but fun.
I want to make sure you also gave out your website.
Yeah,
If they
sure.
want to learn more of your
Thanks,
opinions.
Larry. Thanks. It's www.miller.forag.com. It's we have a great web presence. We have a lot of fun with it. We're trying to make sure that we have some fun with this campaign because although the topic is important, we need to have take this with a little humility and a little bit of fun.
Sure, and just if you get too serious, then that will work against anyone.
And my wife's going to change the locks.
I think we've got a pretty good team going. I mean, all across the board. I think they're pretty strong. All of the candidates.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
yeah. And we here at this end are getting involved locally. Well, Paul.
Mm-hmm.
Larry's been on the local Ways and Means Committee. He's still a member. John is a town meeting member. I've just appointed to town meeting member. I guess we're getting a signal. Yeah, okay.
All right.
And, we got 45 seconds left. Would you like to say hello or give me a vote, or I will?
Well, sure. I've lived since 1985 right next door in Winchester. Been here a lot of times to watch my kids compete against the good kids of Burlington, sometimes with success and sometimes not. But I intend to go down to the AG's office. The reason I'm running is to kind of put a little bit of professionalism back into that office. That's my plan. I'll work very hard to you, and I hope to have your vote in November.
All right.
Thanks so much.
All right.
Well,
Thank you all very
thank you,
much.
John.
We appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks for the time watching us tonight.
You've got a bunch of